There's a certain kind of person that avoidantly attached individuals cannot stop thinking about. Not because that person begs for their attention, not because they're emotionally needy, but because they aren't. This person doesn't fit the avoidant's usual pattern. They don't play the emotional tug of war. They walk away when disrespected. They hold their peace instead of exploding. And in doing so, they do the one thing avoidants never see coming. They become unforgettable. Avoidantly attached individuals often live in a state of emotional contradiction. They crave connection but fear vulnerability. They want intimacy but only on their terms. They long to be seen and known, but the moment someone gets too close, they instinctively pull away. This push-pull dynamic becomes their emotional reality. And yet, despite all this avoidance, there's one type of person they can't seem to resist, the one they can't control. The forbidden fruit. The emotionally sovereign individual who doesn't chase after them, doesn't wait around for breadcrumbs, and doesn't tolerate emotional games. That person becomes an obsession, not through manipulation or pursuit, but by simply being unattainable in a way the avoidant never expected. You see, avoidants are used to people bending for them. When they pull back, others usually come running. When they go silent, others grow louder, desperate to fill the space. This reaffirms the avoidant's distorted belief that closeness equals pressure and that emotional dependency is something to escape. But then they meet someone different, someone who doesn't react on cue, someone who doesn't try to decode every silence or chase every disappearing act. Instead, this person has boundaries. They value themselves, and rather than chasing the avoidant's attention, they turn inward, back to their own peace. This challenges the avoidant's entire framework. It's not supposed to go this way. They're used to being in control, not of others, but of how emotionally available they allow themselves to be. But suddenly, with this self-possessed person, they're the one feeling out of control. They start wondering, why aren't they chasing me? Why don't they seem bothered? That lack of validation starts to gnaw at them. And the more the avoidant realizes they can't control this person's reactions or emotions, the more they begin to ruminate. The obsession grows not from love, but from disruption. This person is an anomaly, proof that someone can be interested without being desperate, that someone can walk away without hating you, that someone can care without sacrificing themselves in the process. And because this behavior is so foreign to the avoidant, it becomes a kind of emotional riddle they can't solve. This is where the forbidden fruit effect takes hold. Psychologically, we're drawn to what we can't have. For avoidance, it's not just the physical presence of the person they desire, it's the emotional inaccessibility that mirrors their own. The more distant and self-contained this person is, the more it activates the avoidant's suppressed longing for real intimacy, even if they don't recognize it. And because this intimacy is wrapped in freedom, not pressure, it feels safer even as it terrifies them. So they obsess. Not because this person is trying to be unforgettable, but because they are, by refusing to give the avoidant the power they're used to holding. In the avoidance world, the person they can't control becomes the person they can't stop thinking about. Avoidantly attached individuals often find themselves caught in a loop of emotional withdrawal and longing. They have a deep fear of intimacy that drives them to maintain distance in relationships, yet they also carry a hidden craving for connection. This contradiction shapes much of how they interact with others, keeping people close enough to feel desired, but far enough to avoid vulnerability. But there's a specific kind of person who disrupts this pattern entirely. This person doesn't chase. They don't beg for love. They don't fall into the emotional trap of trying to win the avoidant over. And because of that, avoidants become fascinated, obsessed even, not with who this person is on the surface, but with what they represent. The one thing the avoidant can control for avoidance is how they feel safe. When they can anticipate someone's behavior, especially someone who is emotionally expressive or dependent. They feel secure in their ability to withdraw when things get too intense. They might even push someone away just to see if they'll come running back, confirming the avoidance belief that they hold the power in the connection. But the person they become obsessed with doesn't play this game. They don't respond to silence with desperation. They don't try to decode mixed signals or prove their worth through emotional labor. They remain centered, unbothered, and emotionally independent. This creates a paradox the avoidant can't ignore. Instead of feeling in control, they start to feel curious. Why isn't this person affected by my distance? Why aren't they trying harder to be close? That emotional unavailability, that space the avoidant usually creates and controls, now belongs to someone else. And that is unsettling in the most fascinating way. The avoidant starts to notice them more, think about them more, replay interactions, wondering if they missed a chance or misread the moment. Obsession doesn't always come from affection. It often comes from confusion, from not being able to predict or dominate the emotional landscape. The person they can't control becomes the most emotionally stimulating person in their life. It's not about drama, it's about disruption. This person breaks the pattern, holds their ground, and doesn't collapse into the emotional dynamics that usually define the avoidance relationships. And because this emotional balance is so rare in the avoidance world, it becomes magnetic. Their usual avoidance strategies don't work here. And in that failure, something rare happens. Emotional reflection. They begin to question themselves, sometimes for the first time. There is something deeply compelling about someone who doesn't need you, who chooses you without clinging. That level of self-possession triggers both admiration and anxiety in the avoidant. It reveals what they fear the most: true intimacy with someone who could actually see them fully. And also what they want the most: a connection that doesn't rely on control, but on mutual respect and freedom. The very thing avoidants run from becomes the thing they can't stop thinking about, and it all starts with someone who refuses to be controlled. Avoidantly attached individuals often find emotional closeness overwhelming. They fear being vulnerable, being needed, or being seen too deeply. To cope with that fear, they create distance, physically, emotionally, or through detachment. In most of their relationships, they've grown used to people reacting in predictable ways, getting hurt, growing anxious, trying harder to please, or becoming emotional in the face of their coldness. But then someone different enters the picture. This person doesn't react to distance with panic. They don't chase. They don't demand explanations. Instead, they remain grounded, calm, and, most importantly, unreadable. They offer emotional mystery, and that mystery becomes a powerful hook for the avoidant. The emotionally mysterious person isn't withholding in a manipulative way. They're simply not dependent on the avoidant's behavior to define their worth or actions. They don't rush to fix the silence or fill the emotional void. They hold space. They observe. They're not emotionally chaotic or reactive, and this disrupts everything the avoidant expects. In a strange twist, their calm presence feels louder than any words. For someone who is used to emotional patterns that they can predict and control, this mysterious, self-contained energy becomes captivating. Avoidants are often deeply analytical. They observe, they test, they assess. So when they come across someone who doesn't reveal everything right away, who doesn't show all their emotional cards, it draws them in. They start to ask questions in their own mind. What are they thinking? Why don't they seem bothered? Are they even interested? The lack of emotional noise becomes a kind of puzzle, not because this person is playing games, but because they're whole on their own. Their emotional life doesn't hinge on the avoidant's presence or absence, and this is what the avoidant can't stop thinking about. It's unsettling, but in the most alluring way. The mystery doesn't mean being emotionally unavailable. It means being selective, self-respecting, and secure enough not to hand over your entire self at once. It means allowing space to let someone come closer rather than forcing closeness to happen. For avoidants who are used to being pursued or emotionally managed by others, this creates a reversal of roles. Now they're the one trying to understand, to decode, to figure out where they stand. It's subtle, but it shifts the power dynamic in a way that makes them feel emotionally exposed, even if they won't admit it. What truly keeps the avoidant thinking is how this person makes them feel internally, uncertain, intrigued, maybe even a bit unworthy. And it's all because the emotional mystery this person carries isn't a performance, it's authenticity. It's someone who knows themselves well enough not to over-explain, overshare, or and for someone who avoids vulnerability at all costs, being drawn to a person who holds their emotional cards close, yet with warmth and integrity, is the perfect storm. It disrupts their emotional blueprint and forces them to pay attention, not just to the person, but to parts of themselves they've spent years avoiding. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, control is everything. Not in the obvious domineering sense, but in how they manage emotional closeness. They're experts at keeping people at arm's length, close enough to feel connection, but far enough to avoid vulnerability. In relationships, they often dictate the rhythm, when to talk, when to pull away, when to show affection, and when to retreat. This power dynamic gives them a sense of safety. But every so often, they meet someone who flips that dynamic completely, someone they can't control. And in that reversal, something unexpected happens. Obsession. This person doesn't respond to the avoidance distancing with anxiety or neediness. Instead of trying harder, they step back. Instead of demanding answers, they get quiet, not to punish or manipulate, but because they don't chase people who pull away. They have standards, they value themselves, and they won't beg for love or attention. To the avoidant, this is foreign territory. They're used to being the one with emotional leverage. But now they're the one watching someone else walk away, and it doesn't feel like victory, it feels like loss. Suddenly, the avoidant finds themselves off balance. The usual tricks don't work. The person doesn't panic when communication slows. They don't double text. They don't try to win favor back. Their calm detachment doesn't look like indifference. It looks like self-respect. And the avoidant, often without realizing it, starts to chase what they once pushed away. Not openly, of course. Avoidants rarely admit they're chasing, but internally, they're thinking about this person, wondering why they didn't try harder, replaying moments, feeling the discomfort of no longer being in control of the emotional tone of the relationship. What makes this so powerful is the emotional reversal. The avoidant who normally holds the emotional upper hand now feels powerless. That power they used to maintain distance is now in someone else's hands. And it's not being used against them, it's just not being given to them at all. This person isn't trying to control the avoidant either. They're simply not engaging in the emotional dance. They're standing still, clear in their worth, not reactive to rejection. And that calm confidence becomes incredibly attractive to the avoidant, even if it's also deeply unsettling. And the desire to regain that lost power becomes a quiet obsession. The avoidant might start showing up more, being slightly more present, testing to see if the person still cares. And if they sense that emotional independence is still intact, they may feel both drawn to and threatened by it. It's not just about getting the person back, it's about restoring the emotional dominance they're used to. But what they often don't realize is that this shift in dynamic is what they've secretly needed all along. Someone who won't surrender their sense of self just to keep a connection alive. That reversal of power doesn't just challenge the avoidant, it reveals their longing, not for control, but for someone strong enough to resist it. And that's the person they can't forget. Avoidantly attached individuals often tell themselves that they don't need closeness, that independence is strength, and that emotional vulnerability is a weakness to be avoided at all costs. But beneath that surface of self-reliance lies a truth they rarely admit, even to themselves. They want connection. They long for it. Not the chaotic, overwhelming kind that demands constant reassurance, but a deep, safe connection where they can just be seen, accepted, and not smothered. This unspoken craving lives quietly under their avoidance, shaping how they behave in relationships. And when they encounter someone who offers that closeness on their own terms, without pressure, it throws the avoidant into emotional confusion, because this person represents everything they secretly want but are afraid to receive. This kind of person doesn't force intimacy. They don't try to pry open the avoidance walls. They simply offer consistency, emotional calm, and a deep sense of self that doesn't rely on being needed. And that's exactly what makes them so irresistible. The avoidant feels a pull, not because this person is chasing, but because they aren't. They feel safe around them, but also exposed, seen, but not judged, cared for, but not controlled. This is the paradox that fuels the obsession. The person who gives them what they crave most is also the one who triggers their deepest fears. In the beginning, the avoidant might try to dismiss their interest. They'll tell themselves this person is too available, or too calm, or too stable. But that's not the truth. The truth is, this person isn't playing into the avoidant's emotional patterns. They're not trying to fill the silence with noise or break through the walls with urgency. They just stand in their own emotional center, open but not demanding, loving but not sacrificing themselves. And that creates a quiet tension the avoidant can't resolve. Over time, this person becomes more than just interesting. They become emotionally symbolic. They represent something rare, the possibility of closeness without chaos. That safety, that consistency speaks to the avoidant's hidden desire for intimacy. But because it's presented so gently, without force or pressure, it sneaks past their defenses. It makes them feel comfortable, even as it scares them. And that conflict between fear and desire becomes addictive. The avoidant finds themselves thinking about this person more than they expect, wondering how someone can be so emotionally secure, so unbothered by rejection, so unaffected by the avoidant's attempts to push them away. It's not rejection they're feeling, it's reverence. The kind of emotional strength that says, I care, but I won't chase, carries a quiet power that cuts through the avoidant's emotional armor. They may not know how to respond to it, but they can't forget it. This person becomes unforgettable because they hold what the avoidant secretly longs for. Closeness without control, connection without suffocation, intimacy without the loss of self. And in a world where the avoidant is used to running from emotional fire, meeting someone who offers warmth instead of flames changes everything. They don't run, they remember, over and over again. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, validation is a complicated experience. On the surface, they seem indifferent to praise, unaffected by emotional displays, and uninterested in approval. But beneath that emotional armor is a very human need to be seen, wanted, and valued. This desire is buried so deep that even they often don't realize how much it drives their actions. They've spent years learning how to suppress it, telling themselves they don't need others, that needing anyone is a form of weakness. Yet when they meet someone who is emotionally secure and self-assured, someone who doesn't need them but still chooses to be kind, attentive, and present, something awakens inside them. That interaction provides a type of validation that pierces through their emotional distance and touches something raw. Something real. Unlike the constant need for reassurance that characterizes anxious attachment, the validation avoidance crave is quieter and more elusive. They don't want grand gestures or emotional declarations. They want to feel special without feeling trapped. They want to be noticed, not chased. The emotionally secure person offers this exact kind of validation, not through begging or overextending, but simply by being consistently respectful, grounded, and emotionally present without losing themselves in the process. And this is exactly what makes them unforgettable. The avoidant finds themselves slowly gravitating toward this person, not because they feel manipulated, but because they feel acknowledged in a way they rarely experience. This person doesn't overreact when the avoidant pulls away, nor do they disappear completely. They remain steady, and their steadiness is powerful. It communicates, I see you, I care, but I won't abandon myself to reach you. That kind of validation, being cared for without being controlled, is rare for the avoidant. It makes them feel wanted without feeling suffocated. And that delicate balance is what they secretly long for, but never know how to ask for. Even though they might not express it, the avoidant begins to feel seen by this person in ways they didn't think possible. It's not the loud, dramatic kind of recognition. It's the quiet kind, someone noticing their patterns, understanding their silences, and still holding space without resentment. That silent acceptance reaches the part of the avoidant that still remembers childhood moments of being misunderstood or emotionally neglected. The secure person becomes a mirror, not one that reflects judgment, but one that reflects, you're enough even when you pull away. This emotional experience lingers. Long after the interaction ends, the avoidant will remember how this person made them feel. They may not show it, they may even retreat, but deep down, the validation they received has already planted a seed. It's not just admiration, it's something deeper, something that feels healing. This person validated not just their presence, but their complexity. They didn't try to fix the avoidant, but they also didn't disappear in response to the avoidant's distance. That kind of validation, the kind that doesn't demand change but quietly affirms worth, is unforgettable. For someone who has spent their life trying not to need anyone, being valued without pressure feels like both a threat and a gift. And that emotional experience becomes impossible to forget.